Yeah, you could just start looking at numbers and everything and look at tickets sold, and then people will have their victory like, hey, they sold more tickets. Sure, but at the same time, then you could start looking at, well, look at the ticket prices, average ticket prices. Look at the luxury theaters. Look at this, look at that. There's a lot of factors too that we can also as well. Bottom line, the bottom line when it comes to all this, guys, is shut the fuck up. All right, let's talk about that Superman box office, okay? Now, depending on who you are, follow or pay attention to or whatever the hell, depending on who that is, hey, guess what? They either think it's a flop or it's a great success. It's like one of the two. And I'll just say, like, if you think it's a great success, you're stupid. If you think it's a flop, you're also stupid. I'm just gonna go out and say that right there. Because it's, there's a lot more to it when it comes to all this. Yes, it's not a spectacular box office opening, okay? But it's also not a flop. It's not Madam Web. It's not Craven. It's not any of those. International is lagging, which is very interesting. 125 million domestic, 95 million international. So a total of $220 million. Very interesting that the international is not really gathered its footing, not even in China. Now we got to start looking at the numbers. We got to start looking at the numbers, and of course everybody's comparing this Superman to, of course, Man of Steel. They're looking at it at Man of Steel because obviously Snyder fans, gun fans, they're going to do the comparisons, going to do all that and everything. So I, crunched some numbers. I was looking at the numbers and crunching them and doing the thing that, and I was looking at basically, I was going, all right, let's look at the 4 Superman movies, the 4 single Superman movies, okay? We're talking about Superman 78. I'm not going to talk about the sequels, just felt like I didn't need to. Let's talk about the first Superman. Let's talk about Superman Returns. Let's talk about Man of Steel. And then, of course, comparing that because, we had to do the comparison thing, even though what do they say? Comparison is a thief of joy. But a lot of people just don't have joy in their lives and they have to do this. I don't know what it is. It's all pretty crazy, but it's all messy and it's never going to be legit. It's all it's crazy because, just like Rotten Tomatoes, everybody claims that, who cares about box office? Who cares about box office? Who cares about box office? Okay? And you Snyder fans, who cares about box office, right? Even Zach said at one point that, hey, yeah, who cares about box office? It got made. But of course, again, if you want to utilize the box office, just like utilizing Rotten Tomatoes, if I could utilize it to throw more hate at something I don't like, then by all means, I'm gonna do it. And then of course, it's not relevant until you're using it. If it's a positive reaction on Rotten Tomatoes or a positive box office, then all of a sudden I'm gonna use it to deflect and defend and blah blah blah. But everybody always goes like, everybody's just a fucking hypocrite. Obviously, there's a lot of things that have to be incorporated when it comes to the box office. Now, looking at this $220 million box office, but we could look at the domestic number of 125 million. Now, if you go, of course, compare it to the Man of Steel box office that came out in 2013, that box office was $116.6 million. And of course, dummy gun fans right there would be like, look at that. I'm like, no, you can't do that. You can't exactly do that. You really can't do that. Because if you were to add the 2025 inflation, because yes, sadly, there's been plenty of inflation that's happened in the last 12 years. And if you actually do that and you use the labor statistics CPI inflation calculator, you come up with the number of $149.5 million. Now, there's other things that happen as well when it comes to the box office, and we're talking about, other things that have to do with it, like Thursday night showings. Obviously, the Thursday night showings different than what they were, different now than what they were back in 2013. I remember I saw a Thursday, I had like the Walmart early access thing or whatever the hell. It was just different. Everything was different. But, so if we were gonna look at it, if we're gonna look at dollars of Man of Steel back in 2013, according to this, what I'm seeing, but of course there's varying things. It could even get up to like 160 million or whatever the hell. But I'm just saying that yes, when it comes to box office, Man of Steel domestically definitely performed better. More tickets were sold. And then of course you want to look at the total entire box office. Obviously, Man of Steel made $668 million. Total worldwide. That was the entire box office run, which was definitely not a flop. And so then a lot of people are like, okay, well, is it going to have to exceed that? Well, if you, again, add the inflation, that entire box office run is $156.7 million. So I don't think the new Superman's going to actually get to that point. I just don't think that's actually going to get to that point. No, I don't. So, of course, there's a dick measuring contest right there. And yes, I know that these diehard Snyder fans that absolutely hate what's going on here and look down upon people for liking a new Superman movie, they're going to be obviously throwing all that. My mentions were a goddamn mess when I stirred the pot a little bit because, you had people spending money on digital billboards to make a point, and I don't know what the point was made because all I saw was the podcast that this certain individual has. His logo was absolutely huge, which I'm going, oh, that's why you did it. You wanted your podcast logo on it and being big and huge. It wasn't really about Henry or Zach. It was about your podcast, okay? The narcissism is fucking palpable right there when it comes to that. 100%. And it's absolutely ridiculous. Just grown men doing all that. I'm sure Henry Cavill was sitting there waiting like, gee, what are the numbers when it comes to the trending event for when Superman comes out? Am I getting my job back? Am I getting my job back? No, Henry Cavill doesn't actually care. He's just like, I'm doing my own thing. I have now a child and everything like that. I'm sure if he caught wind of it, he was like, oh, that's pretty flattering. People still like my Superman, which they do. Sure, that's that. Maybe he looked at it like that. So at least you have that there, guys. Good job. That money could have went to just AFSP or something else, but whatever. Digital thing, make it a point. You gotta have your voices heard. Now, if we're looking at Superman Returns, I was looking at Superman Returns also when it came to box office, and that opening weekend when it came to Superman Returns, opening weekend it actually domestically made $52.5 million. You obviously adjusted for inflation, it would have been 83.7. So would have been that. In that entire box office run, that's just where you start going, oh yeah, people just didn't really care for a Superman movie back in 2006 because it did make $391 million. And of course, if you were to adjust that, that would be $623.2 million in nowadays. But if you look at the gap between Superman Returns and Man of Steel, which is about 7 years. I mean, I'm sure there was some inflation, but at the same time, it's like Man of Steel almost made twice as much because obviously during that time in 2013, people were like coming off of Dark Knight, and when they were hearing that Christopher Nolan was producing a new Superman movie and it was going to be more grounded and taking that approach, people flocked to it, just the way it was. Back in 2013, people were wanting more of those types of movies, and then of course this is before Marvel Studios was really booming, so naturally, it was just like, Jesus Christ. And then, of course, Warner Brothers and DC just went buck wild. But it all really doesn't matter, guys, because anytime, when it comes to these crazy little, stupid little debates and everything and these squabbles that happen online when it comes to box office, does anybody, realize that the ultimate GOAT is Superman 78? Donner Superman is the GOAT, and it's probably never going to be defeated because Superman 78 made $300.5 million in 1978. So if you add the 2025 inflation, guess what that leads to? 1.4 to 1.5 billion fucking dollars. And it's funny because nobody's gonna, you don't want to reference that. You don't want to reference that, right? You really don't. It's all about James Gunn versus Zack Snyder, which is kind of crazy. But another number that, if we're gonna be, because naturally we're all gonna do the inflation numbers, right? We're all going to do the inflation numbers. So does that mean we got to inflate the production budgets? Uh-oh. We got to start inflating the production budgets? Should we actually do that? Should we get that detailed when it comes to this whole back and forth? Because obviously we know that this Superman cost 200 to 225 million. I mean, it went from 225 million and then it went down to 200. I'm going to still stick with the 225 million, to be honest. And again, obviously the reported production budgets for all these movies, they're always going to sell them. So it probably was more. You could probably tack on 40, 50 more million. I don't know. Who knows? But we'll never know. Right? So now, we could just add the 2025 inflation to the production budget. So if you want to do that to Superman 78, it was a $55 million production budget, which of course got inflated because it was the first fucking movie. So if you were to apply that, to today, it would be probably about 270 to 280, maybe 283 million if it was talking about in numbers. But it's still 1.4 billion, $1.5 billion. So it still would have been an absolute success. Now, when it comes to Superman Returns, that's where it's really bad because that was a $270 million budget back in 2006. So if you were to take that and put it with 2025 numbers, 430.3. Oh my God, that's not good. That's really not that good, you know, when it comes to that. According to all this, okay, now we get to Man of Steel, a $225 million budget. Now, if you were to take that and add to the 2025 inflation, that's $288.5 million. So naturally, if you add that and you do all the math when it comes to like, okay, you know, you do the math of like, you times that by 3, right? And that's like, it gets to like, it still makes a profit though. It does. Still makes a profit. And you could start kind of looking at stuff like that. Still would make a profit for sure. Because of like, if it, you know, in 2025 numbers, the entire box office run for Man of Steel, what was it again? Let's see. Where did I have it? I had it listed right here. Yeah, it would have been 856.7. Okay. Now, if we take that 285, so if we take that, let me do that math again, times 3, that would have been 864. So it would have been just shot. So if you really want to crunch those numbers and really want to add the inflation to all of it, you know, I mean, that's where things are going to start falling flat a little bit. Because if you have Man of Steel entire box office run being 856, and then if you times the 288 million by 3, it'd be 864. But at the same time, it's like we're not going to like sit there and do that because tickets sold. I mean, that's the thing. The tickets sold when Man of Steel came out. Way more tickets. More tickets were sold than for this movie right here. Okay? We could do that. But then, of course, it gets sloppy. Because, yeah, you could just start looking at numbers and everything and look at tickets sold, and then people will have their victory like, hey, they sold more tickets. Sure. But at the same time, then you could start looking at, well, look at the ticket prices, average ticket prices. Look at the luxury theaters. Look at this. Look at that. There's a lot of factors, too, that we can also as well. Bottom line. The bottom line when it comes to all this, guys, is shut the fuck up. That's basically where I'm getting at. It's like, shut up about this, okay? This is not a flop, and this is not a spectacular successful opening, okay? It isn't. It just isn't. It's a decent opening. It's a good opening, and it's an opening enough to show you that the DCU is not going anywhere, that they are not going to be pulling the plug. There's nothing. It was good enough, and I don't know where it's going to end up landing. I think it will cross $500 million, but it might not go too much farther than that. I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens. Going to be interesting to see the box office drop next weekend and everything when it comes to all this, and that's really going to like show some things. But at the same time, yeah, who knows what's going to happen? And like I said, this genre is struggling. It's definitely struggling. But, you know, this new Superman movie seems to have a lot better word of mouth, of course, online. It's just being praised like crazy. Obviously, you can look at the Rotten Tomatoes stuff, you know, and don't, you know, fuck Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah, but if it was like a Rotten Tomato and the audience wasn't liking it all that much, guess what? You would be utilizing that as ammo to throw to the other side.